Go ahead.
Okay. So, well, Allie, first, we're so excited to have you today on our podcast. We kind of met through social media, and first, we'd love for you to tell us and our listeners a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure. So I'm a therapist in Maryland. I primarily work with moms who are navigating the struggles of motherhood, pretty much across the perinatal continuum, which can go through trying to conceive, pregnancy, early postpartum, and then beyond. I'm a mom of one daughter. She's 4, so a pandemic baby, which
Oh,
Oh,
is
yes,
unique in itself.
they are.
But yeah, I opened my private practice earlier this year, so I'm really to,
Congratulations.
yeah, branch out on my own and be able to really hone in on my niche. So
that's amazing.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
Congratulations to you and your own private practice.
Yeah.
My God, you guys would probably actually have a lot to talk about because Erin also has her own private practice.
Yep.
That's wonderful. Well, okay, so then let's dive into like the meat and potatoes of it all. Obviously, we're all about finding happiness through hobbies here at the Art of Happiness. Can you tell us about some of your hobbies?
Sure. So I'm a big proponent in hobbies, especially in motherhood. And that was, I think, one of the things that really, when things that you don't expect when you get into motherhood, I thought, I'll be the same person with just a baby, right? And
Got the dream, right?
Not even close, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, because I've always had a lot of hobbies. I've been into sports my whole life. I've loved music. I've loved the outdoors. So yeah, getting into motherhood, that was something that initially was robbed. We were home during the pandemic. There wasn't really outings or things we could do a lot. It was a lot of isolation. So that was kind of a part of my identity I lost that I had to rediscover and really hone in on, really, it wasn't until probably like 2 years postpartum when I really felt like, okay, I can dive back into some of my interests. I've always enjoyed running, like being active through movement, going to concerts, cooking.
Mm.
So cooking was an interesting struggle of mine. And I know it's not everybody's like cup of tea, but I've always like I've taken cooking classes. Like I, went to Italy and did this whole thing, went to Thailand, so I really love cooking different cuisines. And my husband was in the process of becoming a firefighter. And I don't know if you know about firefighters, they're very picky about cooking and everything.
Oh,
I did.
I did not see that.
I like that.
Yeah. So if you ever see a bunch of firefighters at the grocery store, they're probably like trying a new recipe or doing all
Love
kinds of
that.
things. But yeah, he was never never cooked because it was always my thing. So
Okay.
and be able to like learn these new recipes and try new things and almost like develop it as a new interest for himself. I was kind of resentful and jealous. I'm like, I want that time. I want to do that kind of
Yes,
stuff.
I can relate.
So that was something when I really noticed, I'm like, okay, something's gotta shift here. So now that we're 4 years in, things feel much more balanced with that. I can lean more into my hobbies. I have a half marathon next week.
Oh
wow.
God.
Running. So yeah. That was a little bit of an impulsive day. Like I had been running postpartum. That running's always been a big interest of mine. And not this kind of distance. Like the last time I ran a half marathon was 10 years ago.
Oh
So
my
it's very different running in your late 30s
Yeah,
versus your late 20s.
for sure.
My knees are like WTF,
gosh.
like what's happening. But I'm excited. I'm not, I'm just going to finish it. So I'm
I
excited for
love
next.
that.
Yeah, that's amazing that you're starting to really get back into a lot of the things that you love before having a child.
Mhm.
And I want to touch a little bit on that because I do think that first like 3 to 4 years is like such a hard time when you have a child or a couple of children because we're kind of in the similar situation. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old,
Mhm.
and TMs are a little bit older. But we can definitely resonate with that. And I think that's exactly where we're at in our lives too, is trying to get back to finding who we are and what we love and all those things. And I don't know if you have any advice for like a new mom and how to maintain your identity, because I think that is something we all struggle with.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing is wanting to be able to like quote do it all and
Mhm.
not have that be a reality. And I think having some expectations managed about like, yeah, you won't be able to dedicate time to hobbies probably in that, first 3 months. Like you're sleep deprived, you're kind of just surviving at that point.
I feel like first 2 years, honestly.
I mean, yeah, it probably goes beyond that for a lot of folks. Yeah, it can absolutely go beyond the first 3 months.
Yeah.
I actually, well, what's kind of like funny, I mean, not really funny, but like a lot of the clients that I have coming in, as new clients, are coming in around 4 months postpartum.
Okay.
And I'm like, I thought that things were going to be easier now. I thought I was going to have a groove, but there's a big shift at that time. Is really hard for a lot of people. So
I think that's a good point, because I feel like I remember thinking that too, because everybody says that maybe is when your kid is supposed to start sleeping through the night and it doesn't happen and you're like, what the hell?
Delusions.
I would imagine there's some correlation there, right? Maybe we just need to all lower expectations and put it out there that it's actually not going to get easier at 4 months.
Well, we need to figure out who was the first one that started the rumor that having a kid was just going to be, you'd be the same person, but there's just a baby there. Like, who started that rumor? I'd like to go back to them and talk to them and be like, no, you are starting a trend that is creating this world of delusion.
It's so true. Yeah.
Because I think by us all like talking about this, like about the actual true reality of it, I think could maybe set other women up for success and not feeling like they're failing because they aren't able to do it all, because the reality is you can't do it.
Absolutely.
And be that expectation that it could take a couple of years.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, a big thing that I learned, just to kind of touch on that identity shift, is that we're going through a whole developmental stage. It's called matrescence. So, adolescence, we all know that, from
we know that word very well.
We don't want to go back, right?
Yeah, right.
And that was really hard because, all the hormonal shifts, the emotions, the peer issues, like relationships, like there's so much going on. And we have a phase in motherhood that's called matrescence.
I have never heard of that.
I have not either.
It really parallels that. Nobody's heard of it. I mean, I hear about it a lot because I surround myself with a lot of people who are in the motherhood space, but I didn't know about it. And I had been specializing in motherhood for a couple of years prior to really, honing in on it and prior to having a child. And I'm like, wait, I've never heard of this. Like, what is this? So I think also accepting that, we're going through a major developmental shift where we are a new person. We do have a new identity. It's okay to have new interests and, different focuses in our life. But I think what's unique to adolescence, or not unique, but common to adolescence, is that we do that in community. We do that with other peers. We're in school, we're in sports, we're in activities. So we're all kind of going through it together. It's like that commiserating together. But in motherhood, so much of it can be in isolation or not having a village, not a lot of support. So that's where I think that struggle is, where it's like, well, I should be able to just do it, right? But you can't,
That is so interesting.
That is really interesting.
So, Mom, can you say what what is the word again?
It's called matrescence.
Matrescence.
So it's just like adolescence, but like mat in front of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
A new vocabulary word.
So much, but
vocabulary lesson of the day. Yeah.
That makes so much sense, because not only, all three of us, it sounds like we're in a very similar place in our lives. We're going through this transition period, but we've also talked to so many women that feel similarly, and that makes so much sense to put a name to it.
It really helps. I personally find that in going through this, actually having words to apply to some of these feelings really it's kind of comforting, actually, because it makes me feel like it almost kind of validates my emotion. I shouldn't say it like that. And it shouldn't take a word to validate my emotions or what I'm feeling or experiencing, but truly having a word does.
It helps you feel like you're not crazy, that you are.
It's just told me I have matrescence.
It's like, go tell everybody. It's like, I'm going through matrescence. Leave me alone.
Hey, so I'm matrescing over here.
Right.
Love that. Yeah.
Verb it up. Yeah.
Great. One thing that came across on I think it was on your social media, on your Instagram page, was you had something about like helping women unsubscribe from the supermom myth. And I love that. And that really resonated with me. And I felt like that was something I wanted to touch on too. It was just like, not only rediscovering who you are as a person, but also kind of letting go of needing to control everything and be in charge of everything, and getting rid of some of that mental load. And I don't know if you could speak to that a little bit on how you've tried to overcome that as personally.
Yeah. So personally and professionally, it operates in different ways. Personally, because it's, my life, I know it very well. I was able to really, explain to my husband, this is something where I can't carry all the mental stuff. Like I can't carry
Fantastic.
all the invisible tasks. And I think
Mhm.
a lot of it happened really, truly by default. It wasn't this conversation where he had where he's like, okay, you're gonna take all this stuff and I'm just
Mhm.
gonna like, do some of these things. And he's a great
Yeah.
dad and all that stuff. And I think that's where a lot of moms feel torn. It's like, well,
Mm,
I have a good guy, I have a good dad, he's a
Mhm.
good dad and all of that. But like that doesn't minimize the fact that you're carrying all of this information about, oh, I need to order this, I need to size
Excellent
up
point. Yes.
clothes,
Yes.
like the school field trips next week, all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's like you need to balance that. So we found our own system, in terms of like we like seeing things visually on a calendar, and that really helps, especially with his rotating schedule because he is a
Oh
firefighter.
yeah, with the firefighter schedule.
Right. It's actually great because in his prior job, he was working like 12-hour days all the
Oof.
time on his
Mhm.
email, on his computer. Now it's like when he's off, he's off.
mm.
That's
So
That is nice.
fantastic.
Yeah.
he's off like several days in a month, where in his prior career, that wasn't the reality. So now I found things are much more balanced versus when we were, early parents and I was breastfeeding
Yeah.
and there's just all the time that takes. And then you just become the default parent because
Yeah.
sometimes it's easier that way. And I hear that
Right.
all the time with my
Yeah.
clients. It's like, well, it's just easier if I do it, or it's, harder to have to explain all the steps
Mm,
in terms of like, XYZ, and I
Mhm.
might as well just do it. So I think a lot of it is just kind of letting your husband, your partner find their way, I
yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for a lot of moms, that does mean that they do kind of have to leave the house because you might hear crying, you might hear a
Yeah.
tantrum, you might
Mhm.
hear, something, and it's easier just to walk away from it all. And that's where maybe finding that time to dedicate to a hobby can be during that time when your partner is covering bath time or dinner,
Mm,
Mhm.
that sort of thing. So
I think
I
that's
think
great advice.
first,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm,
yeah, I think first finding something that is like the lowest priority for you. So like
hmm
for
Mhm.
me, like I didn't really care about bath time. So I'm
hmm
like, you take bath time and then I'm gonna do XYZ. So
That's such a
um
great tip.
yeah,
That's a
yeah.
really great tip. That's a
It is.
because like I think, man, I really could have used this tip 6 months ago, Allie. Like I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, okay, so
The algorithm didn't show you me earlier enough.
Right.
Yeah.
dang
Right.
it, because like I'm somebody like I totally relate to the mom that you're describing there. The mom who's like, I've got a great husband, he's a great dad, but man, is it really, it's just a lot easier
hmm
for me to just
hmm
go and do the task as opposed to say, hey, here's my list of
Right.
tasks
And explain it.
and explain
Yeah.
it and then divide it up. And that's not because of the fact that I don't think my husband could comprehend what I'm trying to say. It's just because, again, in my mind, I'm like, it's easier, and I don't want to put anybody out, even though it would not put him out. Like he wants to be an active member. But, in my mind, I'm like, I don't want to put him out. But then whenever I tried to sit down and like think about like, where do I start and like trying to divide up the mental tasks, I why didn't I think about just going for the like a rating system and pick the lowest thing that I don't prioritize as like a
hmm
need be thing and then like slowly have like that be like
Yeah.
that entryway. So would have been nice
No, I like
to
that.
consider.
That structure is better. It's much more organized than just trying to figure it out day to day. Because I feel like that's what happens a lot. It's like, all this stuff needs to be done, and you're trying to delegate, and then it just becomes
Yeah.
more overwhelming. So I like that idea a lot of.
Yeah.
And so during your time that you separated, had your husband take over some of these tasks, what did you find yourself doing? Did you end up going and doing some hobbies, or did, doing other household things?
Yeah, I think initially it starts with the household
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Like, okay, he's doing this, so I'm going to put away the dishes, I'm going to put away the laundry, that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
it's really hard to not have that urge to do a
Yes.
lot of that for so many moms because then, it's just, it gets it taken care of. For a lot of moms, they get overstimulated by clutter, by mess. So it's like, okay, this lightens my mental space, and that's okay, because then that might allow you to actually dedicate time to looking inward of yourself of like, okay, what are my interests now? What is something that I would find myself wanting to do with this time? It's also hard because I think, and this is something I think I mentioned in one of my posts, where it's like when moms are doing hobbies in the home. So let's say that my husband is bath time and I decide I'm going to like read a book
hmm
or, watercolor or something like that. then I hear all of a sudden like, hey, can you grab this? And I'm like, okay, I'll
Yeah.
put this down and
Yep.
then I'll come
So
up,
you're back in it.
yeah. So then I'm like back in the game,
Yep.
and so it's like one of these things where I think finding things outside of the home, as hard as that is, because I know childcare is a huge barrier for so many moms.
Mhm.
I think that really in the past like 3 months, that's what's really like we found ourselves in a groove where honestly we were back to me being default and that sort of thing. So when I signed up for this half marathon at the end of August, I everything shifted where I was like looking at the calendar, mapping out my long runs, mapping out, okay, you're gonna pick her up from daycare this day, so I can do this workout, and it just became like my priority.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
mean, obviously like my family was my priority, but it became
Absolutely.
like
Yeah.
my personal
Yeah.
priority, my
Mhm.
personal goal.
Yeah.
So I think if I hadn't have signed up, I don't think I would have scheduled those things or made them as much of a priority because you can't just sign up for a half marathon and then just go run it 2 months
Right.
later.
Right.
No, you can't.
So
I mean,
it's
you can
something that,
try.
like I know. I mean, you absolutely could try and do that. I'm not knocking that, but your
No,
body
it
will
gives
probably be
you
like
a
kicking you.
goal and some
Yeah,
accountability. And we've talked a
yeah,
lot about that we feel like having accountability with someone else or with something like what you're saying, you're
Mhm.
dedicated to something has been really helpful to get us to stick with, you know, prioritizing self-care
Mhm.
like as hobbies. So that definitely, I mean, we can resonate with that as well. So we
Yeah.
found that to be true. So running has been your big hobby lately, and then yep.
Recently it's been running. When I think about things that I do more passively, it's been like music.
Mhm.
So really kind of leaning back into like old music interests from like high school, even,
Yes.
Are you
that's
like listening to old
oh
music?
yeah, just
Yeah,
listening
yeah.
to it or researching like, okay, is there a
Yeah.
concert coming up?
Hmm.
I love kind of being in an outdoor concert space.
Hmm.
So just finding things that can be more experiential
Yeah.
things as well versus like personal goals and coordinating with friends, like do you want to go?
Hmm.
So that's been a lot of fun. Other than that, I did have a like kind of a bucket list over the summer of things I wanted to try. Like
Oh,
I wanted
nice.
to learn like the ukulele, I wanted to do
Love
like pickleball, things like that.
Yeah.
That didn't end up panning out because I was very much like, okay, this is my wish list. It's not like a to-do list. This is like what I would wish I would be
Hmm.
able to do.
Mhm.
So yeah, I still have some things in the back of my mind maybe that can be a new focus. But I found personally for me, if it's not scheduled in, then I'm probably not going to make it a
Yeah.
priority.
That's a really good point
Yeah.
about talking about scheduling in
Yep.
because it's so hard to, going back to you talking about like prioritizing things. I still to this day struggle with prioritizing self-care
Hmm.
higher and hobbying higher
Hmm.
than my normal daily
Hmm.
mom and wife
Definitely.
duties,
Hmm.
right? And I do you have any tips on how to make sure that you get that scheduled? I mean, is it as simple as just put it on a calendar and like hold true to that? But like I tried that and then I found myself just rescheduling.
I know it is. Yeah.
It's like, how do you honor yourself? How do you honor that system? Like, what is your advice that you would offer to moms for that?
Yeah, I think accountability can really help.
Mhm.
So, if possible, and I know this is something, again, I hear a barrier is that moms want to go out and do things like they want to sign up for the pottery class or
Yeah,
whatever.
we
They're like, I
do.
don't want to do it alone. I want to have
Right.
a friend do it. And then it's like coordinating with the friend. So,
Right. It's
as
so
much as humanly possible, try to have a buddy with it, try to have some kind of other accountability.
funny.
There you go. Yeah. I know it's sweet, I guess sweet to say. Like my mom has kind of been my accountability because she knows
Awesome.
to me. Yeah, she's an angel. She's great. Like this week, she's like, hey, when are you going on your long run? Because she knows my husband's working a 48 this weekend. And she's like, I know you want to do it. And I didn't ask her. She asked me. She's like,
Oh, that's
what time
awesome.
did you want to do that? So she
Yeah.
knows like, okay, this is like
Good
something
job,
we're doing.
mom. Yeah.
So yes, I think even so again, if you can have a buddy, maybe having someone ask you like, "Hey, when are you doing that?" Or I can be your wake up call in the morning and text you a reminder, that kind of thing. So having just someone who knows, like tell someone that,
Yeah.
"Hey, I'm doing this. I want to make this a priority." And yeah, then as much as possible, making it like a non-negotiable.
Mhm.
So for example, I mean, again, I keep using this marathon thing, but like,
No, it's a great,
It's important to you right now. We're so
yeah,
happy for you.
it's become a big important thing. But like last weekend, my husband said, oh, can you just do it later in the evening? And all I said was, that's not going to work for me. I wasn't, being rude. I wasn't being just,
yeah.
but I was just like, that's just not going to work for me because I want to do it in the morning. The
Mhm.
run, the actual day of is in the
Good
morning.
for you. Oh my God.
And he was just like, okay. So I think it was one of those things where it's like he was seeing if I was able to compromise and was supportive that I wasn't. And then the world didn't
Never
end.
hurts to ask, and you just adapt.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, that's like, I feel like there's so many moments where I want to say that and they don't because it's that people pleaser in me that I'm like, oh yeah,
Erin.
figure it out. Like that, to hear you say that's, I just love that. I'm gonna write that down because I just need to put that in my brain and use that. Like, I love that.
In fact, I think I'm gonna include like a little hair flip in it. That's not gonna work for me.
Yeah, a little sass in there.
I know you're right because I think like we worry. Well, I think women are naturally a little more like people pleasing. That's how we're like, especially our generation, and it's so easy to or it feels easier, I guess, to just give in and let to make everybody happy and not cause conflict. And but like you said, the world didn't end, and he probably now he understands your boundaries and hopefully like won't even ask.
But yes. I want to go back to the whole where you were talking about like holding like finding a buddy system, right?
Yeah.
Like obviously we've talked about how we've learned in this of finding a buddy system. Something before we started doing this that I found I would make up my own excuses when trying to talk with my husband about like I needed to get out and go find hobbies. Is my complaint was I was like, well, all my friends are also moms and also people pleasing, and they also can't step away. But today you gave me a new word that I can be like, no, girls, we're going to Matrescence. Like we're going and doing this together. And so I think that like I'm spreading this word everywhere.
Yes, I love it.
It's going to be trending on Instagram.
Yes, I feel like I'm on Sesame Street right now. I'm like, the word of the day is Matrescence.
Yes, I love it.
So I feel like, lady friends, if you're out there and you're like me, and you're like, well, I can't ask my friends because they're also moms. And they also are doing this. You introduce them to the word mattress, and then we just go with it. Like, here's our new trend.
Yep.
We figured it out. It just took the three of us to get together.
We deserve it. Yep. Absolutely.
I love
that. So let's see.
So talking about like dad hobbies and mom hobbies, you already kind of touched on it a little bit. And it's actually kind of how we found you on Instagram is it was, I believe it was your cousin that approached you and kind of asked you about the idea of like, is there such thing as dad hobbies versus mom hobbies? Can you explain a little bit about what the definitions are for those two things and what your thoughts are on that?
Yeah, so my cousin's great. She has children that are about 5 to 8 years older than my daughter. So she's, in a different stage of motherhood than I am. And she brought some really, I think, important wisdom. And her husband's also a first responder. So it's like she can relate to the idea of like, okay, you just kind of be the default parent, you hold the house together while they're gone, like all of that. And now she's back in the workforce and has found that it's really important for her to be out in her community, be out and develop those female friendships, because what we were discussing, after one of my previous reels was that mom hobbies are the ones that are found basically inside the house or in close proximity of the house. So think, reading, sewing, gardening, cooking, you name it, like anything that can essentially be done in the four walls of your house. And the kids can easily interrupt you. Your partner can easily interrupt you. It can be pushed to the side after, the daily tasks done. It's repeatedly kind of pushed to the bottom of the list. Whereas dad hobbies are usually outside of the home. They're scheduled, like golf tee times, or like my husband used to race motocross. There's a whole story there. He's kind of retired from that after a pretty bad injury. So we're not 22 anymore. But yeah, and those were like very long days. I know some other, people in our area, like their husbands might be hunters. They might be on sports teams, lacrosse, adult men's leagues, like that.
Our husbands do Dungeons and Dragons.
They did.
Yeah, poker, cards. Yeah,
5 hours of slaying the dragon.
Yeah. Yep. So, mom hobbies again can be done in little spurts of time. They're smaller, they're easily pushed aside, whereas men or, dad hobbies, they're more scheduled, they're out of the home. They can't easily be, taken away from their activity. So, yeah. Yeah.
And I really like that you took it a step further in there because you even kind of talked about how while there is that facade that there's dad and mom hobbies, but those hobbies, hobbies are actually very neutral.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's just more about conversating with your partner, right? Can you go a little bit more into your theory of hobbies being neutral?
Yeah, absolutely. Because when I think of a hobby, like if I wanted to, go out and learn golf, I
Yeah,
could.
you could.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know some moms, I've talked to some moms who are doing
Yeah.
just,
Yes.
they're like, okay, you have your tea time Saturday, I have my tea time Sunday.
There
Like,
you go. Exactly.
and I love that. And again, it doesn't have to be, I think, a more male dominated activity.
Mhm.
But the idea is that, yeah, any activity can be neutral. Think about when we were like in grade school, younger, like I played basketball, I played lacrosse,
Yep.
you did things that were just like, there was a boys team, a
Liked
girls.
it. And you
Yeah.
did it.
Yeah, anybody can do it. But obviously as time goes on and our time gets more dwindled down in terms of making ourselves a priority, we either don't do anything or we just find things that are just kind of there within the home
Mhm.
already. So
Absolutely. You
It's
just
so true.
adapt. Yeah, you adapt to your
yeah,
partner and
right.
you adapt to your lifestyle, and everybody's family home is different, different things work for them. But I just really liked that point that you were like, you recognize that there theoretically are dad hobbies versus mom hobbies, but really when you come down to it, hobbies are just neutral and
Right.
it just comes down
Just the
to
way we've been conditioned to,
yeah, it's just a conditioning, and we just need to work on that and really make sure that we just find conversation, like what you do with your husband when you're like, I really can't accommodate that request. Make that a norm within your home, and you don't have to do the hair flip that I threatened to do to Pat. I won't do it to him. I love you, baby.
But I do think it opens up like this idea, because I think even when you are searching for a hobby or just trying to reflect on what you like as a person, just opening your mind to every possibility.
Yeah,
Because I do think we default to those hobbies you find on the list, right? And then we don't even, and then maybe there's mom guilt there too that comes into it. Like that idea of being away for 4 hours, you just don't feel like you can do it. And just being open to that and being okay with it. I think we found through like this podcast has become our new hobby, and we're gone for about 5 hours or so once a month, but they didn't die.
They didn't.
They said,
everyone's living.
and each time we do it and put ourselves out there, it gets a little bit easier.
It does.
And more comfortable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and that's such a great point. The more and more you do it, I mean, that's really how I approach a lot of, uncertainty, discomfort, anxiety that comes up in just the motherhood space. Is that the more that you do it, the more you get comfortable with taking the baby out and going to the grocery store. Like, okay, I got more comfortable with it. So the same thing, the more you get comfortable with saying bye and driving away and ready to handle it, like the more tolerable you'll be able to handle it. Because I think initially, yes, there's mom guilt. There's also a lot of anxiety that might come up with a lot of moms, especially if they're struggling potentially with, postpartum anxiety, postpartum OCD, PTSD. There's a lot of like mental health concerns that can be at play here. So I don't want to minimize that. But I think if you have support from, a trusted professional, they can help guide you and like, all right, let's take those kind of baby steps. Let's make some progress to you having this time outside of the home. And yeah, the mom guilt, oh my gosh, like if I only had $1 for that, I would be like, for the amount of moms I've talked to about mom guilt, it's just like this thing where, is that even really our voice talking to us in terms of why we should feel guilty? I really think it's like society just saying like, do more, be more, you're not good enough, why'd you even have kids if you want to spend the weekend away from, it's messages that are just so detrimental.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Like,
is that an inner voice or is it an outer voice?
Yeah.
And we're just, very intuitive people and picking up on that. Wow, that's sticking with me a little bit. My gosh, I mean, you've been so wonderful today. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be with us, teach us new words.
Yes.
Obviously, I'm loving that.
And I love that you are at a place in your life where you're able to branch out now and do your own hobbies. And, you've got your new, new business or pivoting your business, right?
Yes.
Yeah, your
Yeah.
profession.
Congratulations
So
on
that is
That's
so
huge.
amazing. And we hope for the best for you. And of course, we'll keep following you and connecting with you.
Good luck
So
in
we've
the
been,
marathon.
yeah.
Tell us how
Yeah.
you do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. The weather's looking good, so I'm crossing my
Yes.
fingers.
Awesome.
Well, is there anything that you want to promote while we have you here? You have the floor.
Sure. I mean, I post way too much on Instagram. I just love, supporting moms. Everything I post is free. I don't sell any like courses or products or anything. And, that may change down the road. But for now, I'm just very focused on providing like a supportive, relatable space, for millennial moms. So my handle is Millennial Mom Therapist all together. If you're local to Maryland, USA, I am running a mom rage group. So that's this fall. I don't know when this is airing, but I plan to run it throughout the year. So that's kind of my thing I'm plugging right now.
Oh,
Wonderful.
wow.
I love
That
that.
sounds amazing.
Love to check out your mom.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'd love to come back on and talk more about that because I mean, a big
Have you
thing
back
that we
on.
talk about is reclaiming your time, reclaiming your space, your joy. So, I mean, it's interesting. Hobbies have actually come up a
Yeah,
lot in the group that
definitely.
I'm running
That
right
is
now.
really interesting.
Yeah.
Well, then we will definitely have you back on and talk about that. After
Okay.
we reach that, let's get you in here again. That'd be great.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, Allie. Well,
Well,
thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. It was great to chat with you.
Thank you. Take
All
care.
All right. Bye.
Allie, see you. Oh, bye.
Oh, that's okay.